Welcome back, everybody. And today we're going to be talking about one of my favorite audiobooks. And I actually prefer it to the book itself. And it's going to be, if you haven't guessed from my fancy dancy background here, Lord of the Rings, the BBC version from the 80s. So let's get right into it. One does not simply adapt the Lord of the Rings for radio. Because Tolkien didn't write a neat screenplay, he wrote a universe, a history book, a poetry anthology, and a travelogue. Yes, a travelogue. And then stapled it all together with trauma. Now imagine you're the BBC in 1980 and you say, let's do this as a full cast audio drama in 26 episodes. And then you learn you have about a day and a half to rehearse and record each and every episode. This is the BBC Radio 4 Lord of the Rings dramatization, recorded at BBC Broadcasting House, powered by the Radiophonic Workshop sound wizardry, and scored with over 100 music cues. Lunacy, but they did it anyway. And today we're going to be tracing how this thing goes from a weekly radio appointment to a box set you buy with your adult money, especially the 1999 US 13 CD release, which is what I grew up with, and then the more deluxe 2002 complete collection upgrade, arguably so, and we'll be going over all the nitpicky things there. But let's crank open that screen share that we love so much. And we're going to start off by sharing. Um, let's see here. Where to go? Aha, this thing. And for you young people who have no idea what you're looking at, this is how you recorded on reel-to-reel things back in the day. But let's go back into it. Um, so first, this is not an audiobook in the one soothing narrator for 19 hours sense. This is a radio drama, scripted scenes, actors, narration used like glue, and sound design doing the cardio. It first aired on BBC Radio 4 from March 8th to August 30th, 1981, Sundays at 12 to 12:30, with repeats on Wednesdays 10:30 to 11 p.m. So yes, Middle Earth used to be appointment listening. If you missed an episode, you didn't rewind, you didn't go back in time on your streaming, you experienced consequences and you literally missed out. So let's go over here. This is actually the BBC4 studio. It is a big, fancy concrete building with a giant radio tower at the top. Neat. Um, so here's a spicy bit of Tolkien audio history. The BBC actually adapted The Lord of the Rings for radio in 1955 through 56, but no recordings are known to have survived. So, the 1981 version became the one. Ha 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 ha. See what I did there? The preserved BBC Middle Earth that people can actually hear, and it's presented in stereo, which is a big deal for atmosphere and scale. It's going over here. The BBC 4. It's fancy looking, isn't it? I know. Rights drama before the drama. Now, before we get to Hobbits, we have to talk about paperwork, because of course we do. BBC began negotiation radio rights around 79, and they negotiated with the Saul Zaentz Company, which had film-related rights after Tolkien sold certain rights to United Artists in 1969, and those rights changed hands later. But here's the twist. Those negotiations were reportedly unnecessary because the radio rights hadn't actually passed to that film rights chain and were still controlled by the Tolkien estate. So yes, they nearly did an epic quest to obtain what they already had. The most Tolkien thing imaginable. I'll go over here to this image. BBC Radio. Look at that. Fancy. Very fancy and faded. The adaptation was written by Brian Sibley and Michael Bakewell. The process was intensely practical. They outlined the story in 26 episode synopsises, each one designed to land at a moment that makes you come back next week because radio doesn't have a next episode button. And the big adaptation problem is the one every Tolkien adapter faces. He'll stop the plot for 3 pages to describe a hill with a vibe. Radio can't do that unless you want to broadcast the sound of producer quietly sobbing. And nobody likes a sobbing producer. And yep, here's my background image you can look at for a minute. Let's go back over here. Nope, I had it right the first time. And we're back. Now, cast. Absolutely unfair. We had Ian Holm is Frodo. Michael Hordon is Gandalf. Robert Stevens is Aragorn. John Lee, I always mess up his name, Menagerie is Bilbo. And Bill Nighy is Sam. Also, there are 2 narrator options depending on version. There's the UK narrator, which is Jerron Murphy, and there's the US narrator, Tammy Grimes. So if you ever listen and think, wait, why does this narrator feel different than the one I remember? Congratulations, you're not hallucinating, you're just international. All right, so let's go over here. We're going to stop screen share for just a moment and go elsewhere. We're going to share. What am I sharing? It's a thing. Yeah, here we go. So this is actually on the TolkienGateway.net site. It goes over the 81 broadcast here, and got some broadcast history. And let's see, I think they have a cast list somewhere here. Yeah, there we go. Look at the amount of people involved in this thing. And this is just the people reading it or acting in it. That is a lot of cast. Look at this. Yeah, all the way down here. Pretty cool. And here, I'll leave the differences from the book if you want to read on screen. There we go. And we're going to go back to what I was reading. And so the recording happened at the BBC Broadcasting House. One summary says it took 2 months in 1980, and again, the pace about 1.5 days per episode for rehearsal and recording. A more detailed production write-up describes sessions continuing across the late 1980 into early 1981, recorded in blocks of 2 to 3 episodes with breaks, plus the nightmare fuel of winter, coughs and colds messing with continuity. And then, because Tolkien fans will absolutely notice if you mispronounce, and I probably will mispronounce, so I expect hate in the comments from the Tolkien estate, Celeborn. Christopher Tolkien provided pronunciation guides and helped with the Elvish passages. Also, Sibley remembered a mix of laughter and tears and frazzled tempers, and Gandalf actor Michael Hordon reportedly called it a bit of a slog. Honestly, that's the most accurate depiction of a long creative project ever recorded. Sound effects came from Elizabeth Parker of the BBC Radiophonic Workshop. This is the department that basically invented, we can make anything out of tape and vibes, and they did. The score is by Stephen Oliver, who previously scored the Royal Shakespeare Company's Nicholas Nickleby. He wrote over 100 cues for the original serial. There is a lot of music, and there is a lot of sound effects in this thing, and this is why I love it. And director Jane Morgan didn't want effects to be too literal. She wanted sound to feel like a world, and she leaned on music, especially for big action, because on radio, a battle is either cinematic or it's just a pile of yelling. Very true. The run was 26 half-hour episodes weekly on Radio 4, and that Wednesday repeat matters more than it sounds. In a pre-streaming world, repeats were the "Are you caught up?" feature, no repeat, ? Your friend tells you the Mines of Moria episode was amazing, and you just live with that forever. In 1982, the BBC did re-edit the series into 13-hour-long episodes, and in doing so, restored some dialogue that had been cut. So the original radio one had some things cut out, so they re-added some things back in 82. This format is huge for home listening because 13 episode maps cleanly onto box sets and later digital segmentations. Basically, the BBC accidentally invented season packaging. Good job, BBC. We needed this. The drama doesn't wait until the 90s to become a collectible. Disc, yeah, discographies point to a 1987 13 cassette and a later 1995 14 CD box release in the lineage. So before we get to the mainstream things, these two things probably have some value if you can find them. Good luck. I have seen the cassette set before. I've never seen the 95 14 CD box before. So those will be cool things to look out for. So the big story is not did it exist, it's when did it become easy to buy in the US from a big mainstream publisher. That's where 1999 comes in. On December 1st, 1999, a major US retail edition arrives via Random House Audio. The BBC dramatization on 13 CDs, often described as about 13 hours long. Um, People who resell use the description, usually for this edition, emphasizing the cast, the music, the sound effects, and frame it as a gift box audio epic. And I kind of agree with all of that. It is very episodic. So the 1999 box becomes the one people stumble into, and it's the one I'm familiar with. But wait, there's a BBC Lord of the Rings radio drama, Gateway Drug, and it definitely was. So let me stop share. We're going to go over here so you can see what this thing looks like, because it's pretty darn cool. So this will be fuzzy for a moment. Share. And you can look at the fuzzy thing. It is pretty cool packaging. So, how this works for me, Johnny B. I finished Lord of the Rings with the Alan Lee illustration books. Thought it was amazing. And then the announcement for the movies were coming out. And I remember this being at Borders when Borders was still around. And I was like, well, I read the book, the movie's coming out. I've never really listened to an audiobook, and I've seen this in the book aisle. I'm like, I guess I'll pick it up. I remember it being about $70 back then, maybe $50, something around there. I remember it being almost as expensive as the fancy book I was reading at the time. So I looked at it, it looked cool. Picked it up, and I had a boom box in my room, and it had a 3-disc changer for those who remember what those were. So I popped the first 3 discs in there. I remember it's like 9 o'clock at night. And I get through the first one, and the second one, and the third one. And so they're an hour long, right? So 10, 11, midnight. It's already midnight. And I pop in the next 3. And I just going through this thing one after the other. And I remember my mom calling me down. It's time for school. And I'm not done yet, so I'm mad. It's 7 in the morning. I'm tired. But this thing is amazing. And I stayed up all night listening to it. I actually remember moving my mattress off my bed closer to my boombox stereo to, I don't know, get closer to the story going on, I suppose, because it was still pretty loud. Or it was down a little bit so my folks could sleep, and I wanted to get more audio in my ears. And I remember going through school, just tired as a dog, and then getting back home, finishing it, and then I started listening to it when I could crank up the volume. So I did a second round of listening to this thing. And it was amazing. I'd never listened to an audiobook before. And I guess I was spoiled because I didn't realize all audiobooks were not dramatized like this. When I went to another audiobook, and it was just one guy and no sound effects, no music, no cast, just the one dude. I'm like, this is boring. So I have a mixed feeling about audiobooks. So I prefer the dramatized versions if I can find them, if they exist. And this is my very first one. And it was amazing. I mean, look at the box set. You got maps on the box set and on the little disc flap things. And the actual discs themselves are pretty neat looking as well. And also you've got some cool artwork as well. So let me pop over to the buyable version so you can get less fuzzy versions of what I'm trying to get across to you. But I didn't have a picture of everything unboxed except that one. So let's pop over to the screen share again. Screen share. So yeah, good old Amazon. I recommend not shopping on Amazon and actually on the secondary market for this, because I think this is about $120 on Amazon at the moment. Yeah, you get the full image, Council of Elrond type meeting. Sauron's there for reasons. You got Bilbo over there. You got probably Sam and Frodo. Merry and Pippin looking sad. I don't know why he's kneeling. Well, he's not really kneeling. He's just on some stairs. And you got the other elven people and Gandalf over here. On the back, we got the title listings: Shadow in the Past, The Black Riders, Knife in the Dark, The Ring Goes South, The Mirror of Galadriel, The Breaking of the Fellowship, The King of the Golden Hall, The Voice of Sauron, The Two Towers, The Choices of Master Samwise, The Battle of Pelennor Fields, Mount Doom, and The Grey Heavens. And you got this map. This map is cool. And then you got the famous lines: three rings for the elven kings under the sky. I remember listening to this and just playing with the box set as well while I was listening it. I don't know how old I was. I was pretty young then. I was probably 13 or 14 years old, and this thing was amazing to me. I got plenty of things, and here's, yeah, goes over some history about Tolkien. And then again, we have the fancy cast and fancy cursive. And it goes over here. Look at all these side people. Amazing. All right. So, yeah. Yeah. Audio CD 120. Amazing. Okay. Again, a secondary market, you can get it much cheaper, but if you insist, paying $120 to Amazon, I will have this link down in the description for you. So, let's see here. Let me flip back over here and give you something else to look at on screen while I am referencing my notes. There you go. I'm going to go back over here. I don't even know where I left off on my tangent. Let's see here. Yep. Okay. So then in the early 2000s, Tolkien's Explosion hits, and the BBC reissues the radio series as 3-volume sets: The Fellowship, The Two Towers, and The Return of the King. Crucially, this reissue strategy omits the original episode divisions. It's aimed at smoother listening, and now episode 12. In an introduction, it introduces new Frodo monologues written by Brian Sibley and performed by Ian Holm, opening and closing monologues for the first 2 sets, plus an opening monologues for the final set. So if the 1999 is here's the BBC drama, 2002 is here's the BBC drama, now with deluxe framing and extras. So they added some things in. I've not listened to this one yet. I don't know if I'm going to, because it may spoil me more, and I may listen to more audiobooks instead of read books. I don't know. So now in 2002 upgrade, October 7th, 2002 is the publication date, widely listed for the BBC Worldwide America's Complete Collection box. This edition explicitly includes new openings and closing narration of Frodo's, which we mentioned, performed by Ian Holm and written by Brian Sibley. A bonus CD with Stephen Oliver's complete musical score. A demo of John Lee LeMessurier singing Bilbo's last song. Runtime commonly listed around 13 hours and 15 minutes. Some coverage of the re-releases also notes it includes a fold-out Middle-earth map. What it replaces from the 1999 version in human terms: not the cast, not the core production. The 1980-81 BBC drama is still the heart of it. What it replaces in the experience layer is a new framing narration, Frodo bookends, that changes how it lands emotionally. A more continuous structure with old episode divisions omitted. Bonus music disc plus Bilbo's last song demo baked in the package. And BBC radio collection branding and extras that feel designed for collectors. So let's pop back over here. And this is the $75 version, which is quote unquote the definitive, not the one I grew up with, but quote unquote the upgrade version. I may listen to this at some point just to get the little bonus Frodo perspective. I don't know though. We shall see. So let's talk about sound quality, because that is where the internet becomes optimistic. The honest answer is we can document the soundtrack album bundled with the reissue line is described as digitally remastered. And that and that this remastered soundtrack plus Bilbo's last song demo is part of the reissue packaging. We can also document that some re-edited versions included additional music cues, and one Tolkien reference sources say the cues were pulled from the soundtrack album because original master tapes for the series music were lost. What we can't safely claim that the entire trauma was definitively remastered for a fresh transfer in 2002 because that's not consistently spelled out in the public product copy we have. The funny answer: if anyone tells you the 2010 set is 400% more remastered, they may be suffering from a condition known as a collector's enthusiasm. So if you want the best listening experience without ripping CDs or getting lost on listening photos, 1999 is great US box set classic, simple, direct, and very listenable. The 2002 complete collection is the deluxe, Frodo bookends, bonus music disc, and a more curated flow. It's usually the one that feels definitive. And you've already got the 1990 set, you're still winning, the cast is still doing wizardry in your ears. So I grew up with the 99 set, have not listened to the 2002 set. So it sounds like to me the little inserts, the Frodo extra little storylines between versus the one I'm familiar with. That's the only additional thing you're getting, and maybe some remastered music. It sounds like they injected because the original audio files were lost. And I will have links for the buyable, sad to say, Amazon links down in the description. I may throw in the eBay or a book's URL, just general searches instead. I haven't decided quite yet in this pre-editing statement. Yeah, I hope you liked it, and we'll do some more audiobooks down the road, but we'll have to get back to our actual book stuff. If you've listened to either of these, oh, well, Johnny, there's Audible and stuff. I'm going to let you know on Audible, they compress a lot of those files and it does not sound the same. If that doesn't matter to you, I guess you could go listen to the audio versions of these things. I don't know if they're both on there. I think the 2002 one is. I know it is because I listened to a sample earlier before filming. I don't know about the 99 version, but I prefer the real deal, the best audio experience when I am listening to an audiobook. So I'll just buy them or buy the CDs and rip them for personal use only and not for distributing for money. Thank you, federal government. Anyway, yeah, I want to hear in the comments if you listened to these two things before, what your experiences are, if you've listened to them both, what your takeaway is. And I think that's going to do it for today. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe because that's cool. We also got a Patreon and a public Discord. Patreon's for book clubs. Discord's just for, well, talking about books and audiobooks. And I think that's going to do it. I think that's my third time saying that's going to do it, but we're really going to be done this time. And don't forget, keep on booking on.